Daniel Davey, you're very welcome to the Lead Well podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Mark. It's great to be here, sitting down in front of you, having a chat.
It's really nice doing it in person, isn't it? I think the last time we would have done this a few years back, I'm pretty sure it was online. It was during COVID. Obviously, still a good experience, but nothing better than actually sitting across the table from one another.
Definitely. And the other thing that's notable for me is that you do remember the conversation, the in-person ones, whereas I think because for whatever reason, being remote, but also you move on to the next thing very quickly, whereas there's the drive here and the drive back, and you're thinking a little bit more about the whole experience, so it lands a bit more in your own head.
You have that little bit of self-reflection afterwards.
You do.
So obviously, just to give you a little bit of a brief, we really want to look under the hood today at your journey as a business owner. And I suppose not so much looking at where did the journey start and where are you now, but more so looking at specific topics, aspects that come up for us as business owners, leaders, even managers, we might say. And you put up something really interesting this week, as you normally do on LinkedIn. And it was very much about, I suppose, your definition of success in your business. Obviously, it's very easy for us to objectively look at how much money are we making, but as a business owner, we get satisfaction in so many areas. Would you talk to us a little bit about, I suppose, how you would define success for you as a business owner?
Well, the first thing is it's a bit unbelievable. It's unbelievable to think that I might be asked about running a business and that this could be part of a podcast conversation. I've owned a business, first of all, with my friend Brendan Egan. That was back, from 2014 until 2019. And then I went out on the business on my own from there. So while I've been a business owner for 10 years, it's only in the past, I would say 2 years since I left my main jobs that owning a business has become a true reality. And what that means is how you think about it and the risk, the stakes, all of that kind of thing. But I really enjoy being a business owner. I have to say I'm very, very well suited to it. But it took me a long time to make that move because I was doing a job that it was my dream job, but working in team sport. In a roundabout way, I'll come back to your question. But I think what has heavily shaped and formed me has been a part of a team for my entire life. From the age of 7 or 8, I was playing football. And I've always been a good team player, well, most of the time. And I've understand the dynamics of giving more, sharing more support, and what that feels like to have that pat on the back and that energy of being a part of something. So I've wanted to create something meaningful that we can really, really care and share. So share in those experiences of winning and also dealing with setbacks and losing together. I never would have really appreciated or understood how hard that was going to be. And that's creating that, even though that might be your intention, is very difficult because people want different things. And business is not like sport. It's not like you're all trying to win an All-Ireland, or you're not trying to win a European Championship and everybody knows their role. Like, there's loads of overlap, but creating that clarity on what's possible and getting people to buy into that whole concept is really challenging. And I suppose what really spurred me to even share in the last week about the definition of success is, I can't tell you, I have no idea at the moment what the profit margin is. I have absolutely no idea. I have an idea of what costs look like. I have an idea of roughly what general kind of monthly intake there is, but being brutally honest, I don't even have targets set. So for me to be talking about running business and running a successful business feels like I wouldn't say I'm a fraud, because we're making an impact. And that's kind of what I'm going to go back to is, over the past number of weeks and months, there's been a higher level of clarity in what we are about as people, as about practitioners, as a business. And we're starting to really see that clarity make that impact with the people that we're working with on a bigger level. So people are standing back and they're identifying us. And, you know, this doesn't sit well even saying this, being an Irish person, but we actually are leaders within the industry. We're actually doing something differently that's built on an internal, constant reflection on what the feedback is from the clients that we work with. So the bottom line is that we're doing more than surviving. You know, I can see we're up 10, 15% in terms of revenue, and that's great. Our costs are up too, blah, blah, blah. But what has been the driver of that feeling is it's the closest that I've felt to having that momentum when you know you're winning matches, because we know the game plan and everyone's training hard.
I like that. And talk to me a little bit about the process to get to that level of clarity with your team, because I'm sure there are managers, leaders, business owners listening, thinking, it'd be great if I could create that level of clarity. Because I also like how you said sport and business, there's a lot of crossover, but there are a lot of differences as well. I think in business, it can be more difficult to create that level of clarity because there's a lot of moving parts and people are in the mix, and ultimately there isn't that real objective, all Ireland to win. That's what we're aiming for. That's where I think being a leader, manager, business owner, it becomes more difficult to create that clarity. I'm curious, what did the process look like to get your team and yourself to that level of clarity that you're at now?
Well, there's an awful lot of things that you would have heard or read in business books and podcasts, but I've had to really spend the time thinking about. I'm going to start with the team part. What is it that would really motivate and satisfy and engage this team? And I ask them that regularly. And the response is always about progress and evolution and challenge. And that they want to feel that their skills are evolving, who they are, and that it's dynamic. They're not doing the same thing. It's not the same challenges, and that this is developing. And you have to get ahead and create that. So what that means is that there's a huge amount of emphasis on, are there skills? Is there enough of investment? And are you pushing them in the right direction in order to achieve that? So what does it actually mean? What does world-class mean if you say that you want to create that world-class standard? And it's giving constant feedback and not being afraid to identify the small things within the conversations that you're seeing them having or the way that they present. And it's really and truly, it really is about creating an environment where that feedback lands and it feels okay. It's never comfortable to get the feedback, but that I really do have your back and your best interest at heart, or in the agenda here is really your progress. And I have seen that evolution where we go, I feel like we went away from what we knew was working, and that presentation or that session was good, but we went away from our process, which is get people talking. You know, did we really get to what's going to engage this group? And I've put that as the highest priority on my agenda. You know, I meet with them one-to-one every week, and there's nothing that you get to a point where there's nothing that you can't say. Like, I even mean the way that they are holding themselves. and that's not micromanagement or anything. Like, that's not what that it is. It's about your presence. It's about your energy. It's about your engagement. It's about, even to the point where, are you using am too much when you're speaking? And if they see and feel I'm speaking better and people are engaging with my message more effectively because of all these conversations in the background, that's really empowering. Now you can go into any environment and deliver.
And can I ask you, you talked about having that relationship that you can give that feedback and it is taken in the right way. What does that process of building that relationship look like in terms of that somebody knows that actually Daniel is saying this to me, but I know that he has my best interests at heart? It's not a micromanagement piece. It's actually, he is wanting the best for me. So as a result of that, when he does give me 5 bits of feedback a week, I know it's to make me better, and I'm actually motivated by that, rather than going home thinking, you know what, no matter what I do, it's just never good enough.
There's a couple of parts to it. The first part is I always take responsibility. So first of all, I am responsible for the standards here. We had a really interesting situation about a month ago. And look, there's people who are listening to this who have far more experience, have better processes, have better software, better client management. I totally get that. So I'm conscious of it as I say something so simple as I'm about to say. But we had one of the team go on annual leave, and they had access to certain passwords. They had automated quite a number of emails to clients around bookings and things like that. There was certain things that there was projects that were ongoing that they had little pieces to play, and ultimately the handover didn't happen the way that it should, and it really upset the circumstances. Like it really upset the flow of meetings and the productivity that week. It definitely set us back. And I could feel my frustration. Like, I spent 2 hours on one of the things trying to log in to change some links because we were trying to promote something really important and the links were wrong on my link tree. And I was so pissed off. And I just had to take the moment and go, this is fucking your fault. This is your fault. You haven't addressed this. This is not something where we are clear about the handover, and this has happened. This might not have happened, and we might have gone another 6 months and somebody else goes on annual leave and we don't have that handover process. This is your fault. While initially you're kind of going, why wasn't that thought about, or why did this? So the person came back in and I said, like, last week was not great. I am taking responsibility for all of the confusion and for that client getting the wrong email. I am taking responsibility.
Is that the right thing to do, do you feel?
Well, I suppose there's more to the answer.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. But I said, we have to talk about our process. So you asked me about getting to the point of where you can give that feedback. If I went on Monday morning with that one-to-one meeting and I said, last week was a fucking disaster. It was a mess. Like, what was the story with the handover? What was the story? You're immediately creating a sense of anxiety and fear and everything in that person. Whereas now we have a shared responsibility, and as part of the meeting, I said, look, I'm taking responsibility, but we need a process. We need a very, very clear handover process around what that looks like. That's a tiny example of how stuff happens all the time, where I say, this isn't good enough. This is just not who we are what we're about. And then we can have the conversation. But you have to be able to, that's just, as I said, one example, but you have to be able to get to the point where this person knows this is about where we're going here is better than we were last week, better than where we were last month. And that only happens by challenging each other. And so I guess that's where it begins and ends. How does it feel? And that person, we had an introduction to a new team member, and I get everybody to engage. So everyone does their introduction. I said, what does it mean to be a part of this team? And that person said, it means that everybody has their back here. Everyone has your back here. So that's, that's the kind of thing that I'm listening out for all the time.
It's a really, really strong example. And I think from you as a leader, obviously having that self-awareness to know, okay, by reducing the element maybe of anxiety, fear within the room, by taking the responsibility, but also not just taking the responsibility and then moving on, but actually using that as a catalyst to say, right, now we're going to change the process around that. And naturally in time, and I'm sure you've seen this in your own business, I've seen it in mine, is that what happens is individuals then start to improve those processes themselves.
And look,
that's the real magic.
There is stuff happening now that I couldn't create, that my team are creating, that I get, and it's come back to me and my mouth opens. I go, oh my God, that is phenomenal. And that is thousands of hours of conversation where this stuff starts to click and they say, what about this? And there's a real celebration of that quality. And I said, that's the standard. And what's been great is I have the way that I just let people work together, but we have reference points now for these standards. Yeah. So somebody else comes in and I say, look, I don't expect you. There's a lot of work has got to this, but this is where we're working towards.
And I find it a really interesting topic because I just recently submitted a thesis. My focus was I interviewed CEOs, business owners, and I effectively looked at transformational leadership as a style, as a behavior, because it's the most sought after leadership style. We want all of our managers and leaders to be what we call transformational. It's characterized by 4 I's. So you've got inspirational motivation. That's the individual who can do the town hall and get everybody motivated and ready to go. You've got idealized influence. So that's the role model. Everybody's always watching the CEO or the business owner, the Daniel, the Mark. How are they showing up day to day? You've also got individualized consideration. So that's the aspect of the one-to-one relationship. And then you've got intellectual stimulation. So am I able to challenge that person, give them the feedback, move them out of that comfort zone a little bit? All of the things that you've actually described really nicely there in the last few minutes. But what I was curious about was, within the research, when you look at transformational leaders, and then you look at their well-being, so their mental and physical well-being, there's a lot of research that supports transformational leadership for followers, so team members, but actually there's emerging research that shows us that transformational leaders actually tend to experience lower well-being based on the fact that they are always available. They're always thinking about others. They are that role model. They are that inspiration. And over time, that increases our stress and our strain. And if we're not careful about how we refuel and the resources that we obviously focus on, we can find ourselves in a depleted state. What's your experience? Because you are a transformational leader, Daniel. You've described that to us really well there, right? How does that impact your mental and physical well-being then day to day? Because naturally you have other things that you've got to manage as part of life.
Transformational leader. I know what leadership feels like and looks like, and I'm not avoiding the question, but I know what it looks like and feels like, and it's. I will say it's part of my vision. I am working towards that. I feel like I have a long way to go. And but I am working on the version of being exposed to these people. What are the best elements of what I've seen? And I'm hoping that one day that I can do that to the level that these leaders have led and I have been influenced by them. And I think it's about being able to do that incredibly effectively and know exactly what the right piece of guidance or process is to hand over to a person. And so I have a lot. I throw a lot of stuff at people and hope that some of it helps. My well-being and my health and where I'm at is as good as it has been. I'm in a really, really good place at the moment. And I put it down to a couple of key things. I don't know how this is going to evolve, but it has been given myself the freedom to enjoy my fitness and to enjoy being like I'm expressing myself more as a high performance person than I ever had before. So if I look back on who I was as a sports person, I always felt I had a chip on my shoulder, and very few times in my sporting career that I felt fully appreciated or valued for being a sports person. And then, you work in elite and professional sport, and you're surrounded by the best athletes in the country, and you're going, oh my God, I'm nothing. But all you want to be is that sports person. So everything that was actually at a running a 20-meter sprint in 2 point whatever seconds, which if you look at it on a world scale, or if you look at what I could do from the distances I could cover in a match, all of those things were really exceptional, but not compared to what I could see others were doing. So now I'm moved into a headspace where I'm 41 years of age, and I'm playing Masters basketball. I'm playing football on a Monday night. I'm in the gym. I'm playing golf. And I'm so satisfied with the level that I'm able to perform at. So I'm investing in myself. And I'd take another tiny example. When we came in here, Dan is on crutches, and I'm looking at his knee, and he's telling us about that injury that he's after having in a football match, and I hope the recovery is good, Dan. But I think about the way that I've dealt with the injury and how different it is now compared to being a sports person, and the pressure that I would have put on myself to get back. Whereas now I'm in a good place, and I'm still having my knee, if that knee injury, I'm still having my overall attention on keeping fit and the robustness. So where I'm taking this is I feel like that there's enough going back in for what's going out. It is not a perfect formula, but I see extraordinary impact in what I do with my work. And it is honestly about finding the right minds to work with and to work for. And I can tell immediately when I'm working with the wrong person and they're asking the wrong questions and they're not ready for the conversation I want to have with them.
And how difficult is it in that scenario? Because again, I think this translates to a number of different areas. But you said there about obviously the importance of the right mind. And when you're speaking to somebody and straight away, there is a tendency, be it a coach, a manager, a leader, that you're thinking, am I asking the right questions here? Is it me? Am I maybe not pressing the right buttons with this person? How do you, I suppose, unpack that a little bit for me? What would you define as the right mind? You've said that obviously, hopefully your team has it. You're able to spot it with certain clients. But I also feel that sometimes, and maybe there's an important piece of this where you do ask yourself, am I asking the right questions? Am I approaching this person in the right way? But also there needs to be what you've just said there. Probably actually, no, this person, they're not ready for it. Whether it's taking on more responsibility in their job or whether it is trying to change a lifestyle habit.
it comes down to, so I don't get it right all the time. I'm not saying that I do, but it comes down to how willing they are to engage in the process that you've set out. And I set out the process as clearly for every single person. Everyone is on a different, pardon the pun or cliche, but everybody is on a different journey and as a different thing that they're seeking. And when I say about the right mind, it's ultimately about them willing to do the work. Are they willing to do the work on them for themselves based on the process that I deliver? So I will help you help yourself. I will not give you all the answers. If you keep asking for these answers, even though I've given you a platform or process to help yourself, then I am not going to be able to help you because you're not ready to help yourself. And it's that pattern emerges consistently with people who are always looking for an easy answer, or the answer is just not enough.
And again, translates to whether you're trying to make changes with your nutrition, whether you're starting a business. Obviously, you have to be willing to put in the work, sometimes find the process as well. Because, for example, let me bring you back a little bit, 2 years, roughly, maybe over 2 years, you went from being obviously in a high-performing team environment with Leinster and with Dublin, and obviously that was a different setup to running your own business. I'd imagine the level of, although it was challenging, there was maybe a level of comfort as well to know, actually, I really enjoy this. I could do this for a very long time. But then you made a decision to transition to becoming a business owner, building that up over the last couple of years. Talk to me a little bit about your mindset when you were going from challenging, but probably a little comfortable, to, let's say, uncharted territory.
Well, I suppose it's a bit of it's quite complex what you describe, because there is comfort because from one aspect, because you're constantly having the same conversations around performance. There's no conversation that I can't have. Doesn't matter who it is. It really doesn't. Whether it's Rory McIlroy as a golfer, as long as I'm familiar with the sport and the demands of the sport, or it's an elite GA or a rugby athlete, it's focused on performance. I've had the conversation. I have the information. Having said that, a pressure is always there to evolve and also be very clear about your priority in life. And I always have felt that weighed very heavily on my shoulders in both Dublin and Leinster as time goes on, particularly as I was growing my own business. I only was talking about this to a friend this morning, where my priority when I was in those jobs was still always those athletes. It was still always Johnny Cooper, and it was still always Martin Maloney or whoever I was working with, Charlie Ryan in Leinster. Those athletes were still always my priority. But they're also very visibly seeing me write books and create this other life. And they naturally are, on a very human level, they're wondering what is he after? Is he after his own brand here? And again, being from a very small country and a very small sports space, that doesn't sit well with people in sport when all they want is for you to support them winning and succeeding. Following on, I knew my time was up in that environment, and it comes to a tipping point where there's this feeling within yourself, that conversation we were having before the podcast started about seeking challenge and wanting to feel like you're growing and evolving. And I've said previously, and I'll say it again, for lots of people, the pinnacle of my career might be having worked with Dublin and Leinster, whereas that is one aspect of what I've done, what I've achieved, and I'm very grateful for, but I will not be defined by that. There's another part to my life, and being a parent, for sure, on a very personal level, is your greatest, every parent knows that is your greatest achievement. and the thing that you're most grateful for. But in terms of my career, there's something that will always drive me on. And I knew at that time in Dublin and Leinster that my attention was becoming, it was harder to do what I said I was committed to. And you need that thing that will push you. And I knew it was time to do whatever it was. I just needed to step away.
What would you say to people who are in a similar experience right now, where there's something in them saying, as good as this is, everything inside me is telling me it's time to make a change? What advice could you give to people? Because I'm thinking of maybe people who are in jobs and they're like, you know what, I really want to try and do something different. And yeah, what would you say to those people?
My dad used to always talk to me about this. And he used to always talk to me about, it's about your head. It's about how secure you feel in your own mind about that next step. And if you're ready emotionally, if you're ready financially. And there's an awful lot of parts to it. You know, I loved what I did, which I feel probably delayed me moving on and doing this thing. But there was another part of it. I'm just sharing experience, and I kind of try and give maybe a little bit more guidance then. And the other part was that I have become very clear about my philosophy over the latter part of my 30s. So the second part of my career, really clear. And I felt that there was aspects of that very much inhibited because I was responsible to somebody else's process. I became very clear that wasn't the process that I wanted to follow. So you asked me about leadership and team. I always felt I would do this very differently if it was me. I would engage with these athletes differently, and I would give them way more freedom. So, tiny example would be like, I have found the connection, and everybody can relate to this. It's the connection and the relationships part. But I found just so many of my conversations away from the environment in buses and coffees and shops and out and about, that they were connecting to you as a person. So I always wanted to facilitate that more, but those environments don't always allow that, because we have a process here that we're trying to follow, and these are the metrics that we're measuring. What I'm getting to in my answer is that you have to have full confidence in your process, full confidence in how that plays out. And I started to see that playing out in a really positive way outside of that. So away from the environments. That's the first thing. And then there's the next thing is like, have you got the detail in what the plan might actually look like? Now, I'm not good when it comes to detail or planning, but there were people within my network that were saying, what you're doing can only work with your full attention, and it has the potential to. And let's break this down to what it is. So there's an expertise, there's the timing, there's the conversations, and then there's also one other part, and that is, how do you feel about having the responsibility of the decisions? I hated, and always have, been told what to do. And I feel really comfortable with the consequences of my decisions. So there's a lot of parts to that, but I knew I was ready to do these things, to make these decisions, and to lead and to suffer the consequences if they weren't right.
There's a lot, obviously, in what you've just said, and I think you've summed it up really well in terms of, if there is that desire over time, there's a process in terms of building that self-efficacy, that belief in what you're about to step into and do, and obviously being strategic about it. Like, if you've got a mortgage to pay, you might plan it out over 6 months and say, right. But even what I've found, and I don't know if you'd agree with this, Daniel, sometimes even when you may not be making the decision for 6 months, but when you, in your own mind, say, you know what, I've started on this journey and this is my next step. It may take me the full 2 years of the next course to get there. But actually what that gives us so much energy as individuals, whether we're wanting to start a business or to change careers, knowing that I'm on that pathway. So that confidence that you're speaking about, I think it's critically important. And it's also important to mention to people that, you know, you might not have that right away, but that doesn't mean that that desire is going to go away.
Yeah.
So can you listen to yourself and actually say, right, what might it look like? It may take me 12 months or 2 years, but even just moving in and going through that process, you're going to probably find yourself. We spoke before the podcast about the idea of happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction. You can be guaranteed that if you start moving through that process, your levels of satisfaction, fulfillment, happiness, they all start to increase. And I think there's an element of, because what you said at the end, you are in control now of your destiny.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted. I feel like you're part of the answer there, and adding to what I said is probably much more important than what I said, because you're right. Those are the steps that you have to take. Actually, well, I'll share one. I do think that the stuff that comes into my mind is wild. Like, I really do. Now, this isn't wild, but it's to emphasize how human I feel and how crazy and extreme your thoughts can be. But I did think to myself, worst comes to worst, like, I can make it up by, like, I'm not going to be on the dole here. But what's the worst case scenario? At what level of risk can I manage? So when you do a few sums, even if you pull out a piece of paper and say, well, over the past 2 years, I've averaged 10 consultations a month, right? There's potentially whatever, maybe there's $1,000. Could I do 3 talks? Could that bring in? So doing some very basic calculations, because that point is critical. Can I keep up my part of the mortgage and the creche fees? And you build up a level of confidence on that part, and financial confidence and feeling that level of security is very, very important. And then of course it changes and of course it grows. And then you're thinking about the car insurance, and then you're thinking about your health insurance. You know, I know it all adds up, but that very basic, can I cover the essentials and how would I do that, is very, very important. The other element in this that I think is equally as important is based around the idea of being the person that you want to be. And I think the identity element is fundamental. That you can do this on your own. And you can, like, who you are and the service you provide, the belief that has a real value, and knowing and having the confidence to speak about it. I'll never forget Siobhan and the GPA. There was a question that took me an awful long time. Siobhan said there was a guidance for startups. She said, a good test for you is how comfortable you are bringing up what you do with somebody just randomly. Are you comfortable telling them about what you want to do? And that's a good test. Are you really proud to talk about it? And I wasn't for an awful long time. So now I'm talking about it on podcasts, and I'm writing about it on LinkedIn, and because you start to realize, oh, there is something in this. But that's a very important, when you're talking about that transition, and you talk about the work that you do and the sense of pride that you have in it, how comfortable you are to talk about it is another sort of insight for you.
And how much of that is you being extremely critical? You say you're really comfortable now, right? And I always say this podcast for me is a little bit like my own talk therapy as well, right? So naturally, and I don't want to throw like a broad brush here and say that we are business owners or leaders are all like this, but I think people in general are probably quite critical of themselves. I think we could say that for human beings, right? Negativity, bias, etc., etc. And you're now very comfortable at talking about what you do and being proud of what you do. How much of that previously was you being extremely critical, that voice in your own head, not giving yourself credit, and now you've got to a stage where you're able to say, no, actually, you know what? I am very proud of what I do. It's not for everybody, but I really enjoy it. I feel I'm having real impact. I see the benefit. Because technically you've not really changed in terms of, yes, you've evolved, right? But you're still Daniel Davey of 5 years ago who wasn't really proud to tell people what he did.
Well, I think the part that changed, I wasn't really sure about how to answer what you're going to say until you said the very last piece. I cannot tell you the pride I had. Oh my God, the thoughts of telling people I'm with Dublin football and Leinster rugby and watching their expression. Being out on a night out, even 10 years ago, and somebody, honestly, this sounds not great, even saying it sounds a bit weird me saying it, but someone just seeing the expression on people's face, because so many times they wouldn't believe you. No way. And then you're going to walk away. And then you're going to be what? You're going to be Daniel Davey, what? The food fella. And that's the truth. Like, I remember being pulling up at a roadside incident, and there was a load of the fire truck pulled up, these fellas jumped, oh, you're the food fella. And like, that doesn't really make me proud. I'm not the food fella. There's a perception of all of these type of things. So now the pride is because I know if we turn the mics off, we have a conversation, I can help you. We will have a great conversation.
And you have already.
Well, we're chatting. We haven't done enough laughing yet. But do you know what I mean? I'm very confident. Why? Because it is absolutely my intention to help you. That's what I want to do. And I am very proud of my intention and having that intention. Now, the context in pride is all about creating that sense of value about whatever that is and building that confidence. And that is a long journey. That's what takes the time.
And I would completely agree with that.
Yeah, so you're stepping into something different and you have to be as committed to that. And then it's very easy to forget that you started out as an 18 or 19-year-old finishing school, not having a clue what you wanted to do, but that it took you 11 years to get into what you wanted to achieve. And then, yes, you reap the benefits of all of that hard work, but then you step out of it and then you're something else. You're starting again.
I couldn't agree more, as in, again, I know a lot of people listening will relate. I still, to this day, carry a bit of identity from Mark, who was the promising young footballer who played at a professional level for a short period of time. Like, that identity, and what I find is funny sometimes is I'm trying to break that identity and create a new identity, because that was me for a decade. And then it's funny because people say, why don't you talk about that stuff? Why don't you actually promote that stuff? Because it'll be great for your business. It'll be great for your, and no doubt, like, Daniel, previous performance nutritionist for Dublin and Leinster, is good for your brand and good for your business. But I really relate to what you're saying in terms of, but that was a great chapter, but that's not who I am now. And that's not who I want to be proud to be today. I'm very proud of who I am now, and I'm not those things anymore. And I just think there is a universal meaning to what you've said. I've related to it in terms of my example, and I know there's a number of other people listening that will be able to gravitate towards you've just said and get value from what you've just said.
Yeah. But there's quite a bit of thinking to be done for you as that person. Somebody actually on one of our events talked about podium status, and I thought that was and maybe you're familiar with it. I wasn't until she said it, and she said, that feeling of recognition for who you are. I need to move on from that and redefine it. It's not that I'm going to change radically as a person, but I realize that that's holding me back. I realize that feeling of who I once was is not going to help me going forward. Take the best bits of that competitor and to that drive and create that sense of satisfaction in an evolved identity.
There's one subject I'd like to touch on before we get to our final question. And if you don't mind me saying it, we had a conversation a couple of weeks back and it was great, obviously just catching up, talking about business and other things. And you said to me something that I thought was, and it really had impact on me on that day. You talked about the initial goals that you had set when you moved away from Leinster and Dublin. And I'm not going to say what those goals were, right? But if you don't mind me saying, I remember you talking about the fact that, and they were very lofty goals, by the way, but you talked about by the time you got to the end of that year, you hadn't achieved what you had set out to achieve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So extremely motivated, you set those goals for yourself and you didn't achieve them. And then there was a process of dealing with that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I'm sure every person listening to this will hold their hands up and say, we've all experienced that. 100% I have, where I've set goals and I haven't achieved them. But talk to me a little bit about how you manage that as a business owner, right? You set your goal, some you hit, some you don't. How do you meet that experience of failure and still remain optimistic about the following day, the following week?
I was walking out of the dressing room in 2017 or 2018. And Jim Gavin used to always ask me, how are the troops? How are the troops? Because I would spend a lot of time in the dressing room before All Ireland's and all of the big matches. And honestly, like one of the greatest places you could possibly be, the buzz growing. And you're walking out and he said, I made some comment about how nervous I was and the feeling in the belly and just what was at stake. There was some reference that I made to that. And Jim turned around to me and he said, have you prepared them as best you can? And I said, yeah, there's nothing I would change. He said, that's all you can do. And it was like, honestly, the moment was so big for me in that I'm speaking about it now. It just, hang on a second. The manager of this team is after just saying, all we can do is prepare them as best we can. What? Same man could have sent you a message before he landed at 1 o'clock in the morning asking you about, are we ready for the next day? You're talking about somebody was at the highest level of preparation and detail. And I never forgot it because all you can do is set the most ambitious targets for yourself. There has to be an element of realism, but be as open-minded and big thinking as you possibly can be. Commit to it, do the work, and life will challenge you, and running a business and doing all these things will challenge you, and it won't be perfect. And you just have to reflect on, did you do all you could? And did you work as hard as you could? And if you did, then that's fair enough. You reassess, you learn from it, and you get back up and you set as challenging a goals as you possibly can. And there was something else that I said to you that I was very proud of saying and believing, and that is that I don't believe, no matter what happens, I don't believe that it gets any better than how I'm feeling today. or I'm feeling about what I do. I don't believe, no matter how big it gets, no matter where this goes or who I end up working with, because we're impacting people in a really genuine way right now.
What really stood out to me that day, and when you said that, was I think managers, I keep saying managers, business owners, leaders, let's just call it everybody listening, right? I think we set ourselves a goal and a target and we attach so much of our identity to that. So let's say we get 70% of the way there, we don't quite hit it. We generally can berate ourselves for not hitting that goal rather than looking at the progress that we made. And I maybe should have given a bit more clarity. When you said that to me that day, what I could see in you was a pride that, yes, you'd set a real lofty and ambitious goal, but you were proud of yourself for how far you'd come on that journey. And you've really summed it up there in terms of what you've said. And that really came across that day to me. And I suppose that's what impacted me that day, was that level of self-acceptance. Still having, I think people feel if they have that level of self-acceptance, it's like I dropped my standards, right? I think that, for me, I think we need to challenge that a little bit. I think we can have high standards, but I also think we need to have a level of self-acceptance, especially when it comes to setting ourselves our goals and our targets in life, identifying the progress, being proud of ourselves for the progress that we make, not falling into the traps of social comparison, etc. And, you know, for me, Daniel, you're someone who really, and it comes across, anybody listening, if you don't connect in with Daniel on LinkedIn, I really would recommend that you do, because what you share and how transparent you are is for me, it's extremely refreshing. I'd even call it cathartic for me as I'm reading some of your posts. And I think if this is a long game for us all, I think adopting some of those qualities that I see in you would do nobody any harm.
Well, I think we're all different. I really do. And I think how I approach things could be terrible for people who want to achieve these extraordinary things that they're setting out to achieve. And I don't want to put any kind of limitations on anybody else's process or thinking. Like I know, compared to good business people, how far off my approach is. But I summed up, and I will continue to sum up with, what do you want? What is the experience of your life that you want it to be? Well, how will you measure your life? And I bring my kids to creche every morning, and I pick them up, and we make dinner together every evening, and I'm very, very present. And is that taking potential revenue off the business and all of those things in terms of the efficiency and achieving goals? Without question. And is that impacting my original vision to work in the NBA and to work in America at the highest level of sport with the greatest of athletes? Yeah. But, you know, your vision changes. And now I'm very comfortable and very grateful for having a really wonderful family. So I guess what I'm going back to saying is, like, it just really depends on what you want. And those expressions go back to, I know we can do things an awful lot better. I know we're doing some things that are really good. And the idea of being honest is something that's, and sharing is something that's important to me. And I actually struggled quite a bit with, and you mentioned something else that I talked about. You know, do you ever hear this expression around the doubts that you have or the things that you share, that somebody pops into your head because you know that they're your critic? Well, I'd say that went on in my head for, I think it was only when I left Leinster that I fully understood how much of an impact that was having on me. knowing the people who were sniggering and laughing about my posts or the things that were said about the expression of who I was, or like, and it's just been the freedom, just personally, as it goes on, in being yourself. And like, this is the whole thing that is talked about repeatedly over and over. And that is the thing that takes the longest thing to get to. And I talk quite a bit about not being fully there, because why? Because I'm not where I want to be. I said when I came in, I still want to work with the world's greatest athletes. And I sometimes think, if that's what you want to do, is putting up this video about porridge or going on that stag a good idea? Is that taking from your integrity? I hope to crikey not. But right now, that's the expression of who I am.
There's so much to take from the last piece that you've just said. I think what we see a lot is this idea of be your authentic self, bring yourself to work, bring your whole self to work. For me, what you've described there is the journey that we all go on. But also, I think a lot of people, that's a scary journey. That is a scary journey to go on. That's a high level of self-awareness and self-reflection. And it's so much easier just to pick up my phone and scroll, or it's so much easier to stick on the TV and distract myself from all of those things that are bubbling up inside me. But I think you've described the process of what you've gone through to help yourself get to a place where, as you say, this is the expression of yourself right now, but you're fully content, fulfilled, satisfied with that, which for me, I think is an incredible message to kind of finish the podcast with as well, is to kind of leave listeners with that idea of maybe don't be afraid to explore that journey of being yourself.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're there to summarize some of these things, because that's probably a better way of saying it too. It is not being afraid to explore. And there's some of the closest friends that I have, and they're, these people who an awful lot of people identify or see how incredible they are. They're wonderful, and the impact they have, just the energy, just being in their company. And yet they can't figure it out. And that's really tough. That's really hard. It's even hard watching on. It's hard watching them go from one thing to the other and jump around and, move jobs, or like, and the next thing 5 years has passed and you just go, oh my God. If you just take a pause now, just take that pause and explore, like you said, explore a little bit more about what you really want. Is it family? Is that what it is? Is it being your own boss or running your own business? Or is it working in the post office? Like, it, just be true to that person. And then the scrolling, and then what you're talking about, it doesn't, like, that's the hard part in the long run. That's an awful lot harder in the long run if you keep running from that.
Social desirability.
Yeah, the social desirability.
Yeah.
Look, that's what we were built for acceptance. That's, if we were accepted in our tribe, we'd better chance of surviving. So it's part of our wiring.
I think what I'm leaving this conversation with is explore being yourself and ask yourself the question, what do you really want? Daniel Davey, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Great chat.